Hey folks, greetings and welcome along to the New Zealand Tech Podcast. We're back again with another episode. I'm your host Paul Spain, and in the studio today, Matt Archer. Good to see you again, Matt.
Thanks for having me back, Paul. Great to be here.
Now, good fun things happening in the tech world. I'm actually quite looking forward to talking about drones today.
Yes.
That seems to be one of your favourite subjects, as I discovered when we went out droning last week. Is droning a word? What would be the word for flying a drone?
Yeah, well, I think the more formal language you put around it, the more our pilot friends like to keep coaching us about where we're not allowed to fly and where we are allowed to fly. So, yeah, droning, I think. Droning, that way you can just turn off the noise and enjoy the scenery. Yeah. That's great. It's great. And we live in such an awesome country surrounded by water and so many great places where you can safely go and take awesome photos and catch the kids on the beach. It's just, yeah, love it.
It is good. Cool. Well, we'll get to drones shortly. A few other topics to talk about. Now, last year we talked about the Tuia 250 data breach, which was involving the Ministry of Culture and Heritage, and it's some of you will remember this website that was set up for the big event that they were running, and this Waka flotilla and other things that they were doing as part of the celebration that was all going to happen on the water, and people were able to go in and apply, and they went in through, if I recall it correctly, a reasonably basic WordPress site, and they loaded all their copies of their ID, whether it was a passport or whatever, up, and that didn't get secured very well, and then all these folks were left potentially with their identification having been compromised. Look, we're seeing a whole lot of these things recently, but this one has come back, and there's been the details of. I think when they happen, there's always that curiosity, certainly from me anyway, and I know, chatting to listeners recently, there's that interest in, well, why did this come about? Can we not protect people's important data? And the reporting that I've seen on it in the last couple of days, it surprised me. So basically, what they've gone through is, I think, a request under the Official Information Act to find out a few more details, and the general indication was that the website was actually signed off at a senior level, whereas my assumption the whole time was, oh look, somebody's gone off a little bit rogue, they've had an external party build this website, and it actually hasn't gone through the organisation's processes to make sure it's secured.
Yeah.
But it turns out that actually it was signed off. So a little disappointing, but I'm sure the lessons have been learned, and there will no doubt have been changes. But I guess for me that's just it's a learning exercise. It's a reminder that we can't be too relaxed about these things, and there needs to be that recognition that not every website is the same. So maybe there wasn't an understanding that this website was carrying that personally identifiable information, and what the consequences would be if you lose a digital copy of somebody's passport. That gets out into the wrong hands. That's not a very nice thing. Whereas
a lot of those bits of data also I don't think they should even be getting collected, really. I mean, in the States, everyone's acutely aware that if I managed to get your social security number, that I could take your entire life over. And so there's quite a measure of awareness or paranoia about that. But I think, government organisations shouldn't be asking for pieces of information that can be used to steal someone's identity. I think some of those things should maybe just be completely off limits. We need to find other ways to validate people are who they say they are.
Yeah, I agree, and it's something that I struggle, really struggle with, because we have so many scenarios now where a passport or a driver's license is requested, and they want to take a copy of it, and it, right. It can be, an accommodation scenario where we need a copy of this when you're travelling. Certainly have had that in some countries. Certainly the case in in China when I was there last year. I remember buying a car and they insisted on it, and I said, "Well, you're not scanning it, taking it." I went to the bank and I said, "Look, I don't want you to, to be having. Oh no, we have to for X, Y, Z, or oh yeah, I'll just take a copy of it," because I said, "Look, if you've got it on paper and you can file it away, that's probably." In my mind, it's probably actually safer on paper than a digital copy, even though you're a bank and you should have good systems. So they copied it, and then I noticed they were scanning the copy. It's like, hello, so it's so challenging.
Scary,
I mean, a
right?
bank, and I think our banks here are they put a huge amount of effort into security data. So that's the end we can probably be most relaxed, and I'd certainly hope so. But it's disappointing that these things happen. And look, I don't want to throw anything negative at the Ministry of Culture and Heritage, because I'm sure they do a good job on lots of things. And
great initiative as well. They're trying to engage. Everything's right about it. They just got let down by technology, really not being done well.
But it highlights the challenge that we have across New Zealand, because we've got so many small organisations. I don't know how big the Ministry of Culture and Heritage is in terms of people and budgets and things like that. But as with everything else, things are often quite squeezed in terms of budgets, and so you end up with with these sorts of things happening where there isn't necessarily the right sort of gatekeepers, the right expertise, the right checks and balances being carried out. And I guess people don't understand what information is on a website. Maybe that's maybe what it was. Then they didn't follow through with the appropriate process. Look, it's just a very simple website. It has a little bit of information about an event. Sure, you don't need to go to the same extent, but obviously in this case it was holding some pretty important info. So some learnings, and I think certainly would be my encouragement to our listeners that we should all be continuing to step up from that cybersecurity standpoint. And there are so many aspects to it, but I'm continually coming across things every day that just surprise me in terms of the way these things happen, particularly in New Zealand, and I think that's the there's a lot of good that comes from our small, innovative, agile organisations, and the amazing things that we do on a global scale, and we punch above our weight in tech things and sport and all sorts of areas. But some of these areas we drop the ball.
We've got to protect each other as well, right? I think we're a small community. If someone sees, a child running out on the street, as a community, we'll run to the aid of that child and that family. Where I think that maybe we need to run to the aid of people a bit more with these type of security pieces, because the same damage can occur. And I think maybe we all, those of us that have got a few more technology bents and understand some of these things, need to be a bit more vocal and say, well, don't put that in there. That they don't need that. You shouldn't need to do that. Keep yourself safe. And I think we're all got to learn, as you say. We've got to learn from it.
Yeah. Now, sports streaming. We've talked over the years a lot about the changes in our entertainment, and streaming has been one of those big topics. Of course, we've got Spark Sport now as the reasonably new entrant into the market. Sky Sport, both of them working really hard to do great things. ultimately, though, a really big part of it comes down to rights holders, and as more time goes on, I think the technological challenges that we've seen, and there was certainly a fair bit of criticism in the mainstream media around Spark and their streaming of the Rugby World Cup. Personally, I didn't have too much drama.
No, it was good for me.
And it seemed over the top to me, to be fair. But regardless, I mean, everyone's experiences were different. But I think it was a necessary step for us to really encourage people to move into the streaming world, and what they did certainly helped. I think a bunch of homes just step up a little bit in terms of utilising the technology that we have. I know not everybody agrees and thinks, well, maybe that they should have waited till the next Rugby World Cup or something. But look, I'm all for. I think generally we've got really good infrastructure, and that continues to improve. But what we've heard is there's another player coming, and not just coming to New Zealand, and it was a little bit of a dodgy press release that was passed on to me by TV3, who got me to speak about it on AM Show this morning, because PR spin, right? This sort of publicity.
What actually exists.
So it said that their service, it's called DAZN, 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 and I guess that's the world we're in now. DAZN spells DAZN. Anyway, it said it's coming to 200 countries and territories. So I actually have no idea how many countries
I don't think there's 200 countries in the world, is there? I think
it's around 200. But so I actually have no idea. Is that 50 countries plus some areas like the state, the US, if that's kind of 50 states of the US, or there's 50 already out of your 200. So maybe it's 150. So look, I don't know. But anyway, they're
going big though, right? That's the goal.
They're trying to go big. They're talking about trying to be the Netflix of sports streaming.
Wow.
And that again sounds a bit like PR spin, but there is the potential for this thing to happen, right? And we also have Amazon, who have been making some moves in that space. Very deep pockets. When we look at DAZN, they are well funded, shall we say? So their main sort of money sitting behind them, the main owner is, I think, when I looked, he was the fourth richest person in the UK.
Wow.
Ukrainian, English chap. And so he's, it was like something like 20 billion US or 20 billion sort of pounds behind him. So, he owns, I think, Warner Music. So no problem being able to throw lots of money at this thing if the model works. They've been in 9 markets already, US, Canada, Austria, a bunch of others. And charging in Canada, I think charging about $20 for their service, and quite a lot of sport. With their going global, they seem to be focusing on boxing to start with. So I imagine we're talking about a lower cost service, probably sub $10 in New Zealand, but that'll get people on board. And of course, if you're able to reach, I don't know, let's say it's 100 countries. I don't know. If you're able to have that sort of broad offering, then like Netflix, your technology spend gets sort of amortized and spread out across all those locations versus
especially
other
if they get into some of the pay-per-views, if they could bundle some of those and then type of flatline those out, because if for example boxing, there's probably going to be two pay-per-view fights you'll think about getting over the year, and if there was some other pay-per-view this and pay-per-view that, you could quickly make up quite a convincing offering to put your hand in your pocket for.
That's actually a great point. So Yeah, there's a lot, a lot ahead, and ultimately, when it comes to sports, it's down to who owns those rights. But you imagine if you're cutting a global deal, there'll be some sports that will just say, yeah, that's rather than us negotiating with even 20 different markets, right? That's a whole lot of time and work and cost. And so if DAZN, steps up to, let's say it's the All Blacks next now, there's a deal between, New Zealand Rugby and Sky TV, at this stage, but, none of these things last forever. They're a few years, and then things are up again. So that could come up. Certainly, if we look ahead over the next 10 years, that's one of the things that could change. Then Amazon could step into the market. So there's really a whole lot of unknown, but I think it's and you've got Sky TV there that bought Rugby Pass, which is a somewhat, I don't know if similar play is probably the wrong wording, because Rugby Pass is focused on a particular sport and selling that access to watch streaming rugby almost everywhere in the world. It's not. I don't think it's quite on the same scale, but lots of different markets where there isn't another option, and they're really working to own that. Which is, I think that was a smart acquisition by Sky if they can really leverage that. Although, you could also say, well, they're a little bit hedging their bets. Are they a broadcaster of sport for Kiwis, or are they a broadcaster of rugby for the world? One of those might well end up being viable, and the other one may not, and particularly when you've got these sort of global competitors like DAZN and Amazon trying to mix it up, and when they've got very deep pockets, they can just go nuts and get the rights, and then once competitors have fallen away, then they can dabble around and change prices. And I guess if you think about it at the moment, if you're really into sport in New Zealand, you might have your Sky subscription, Sky Sport, bit of Spark Sport. This comes out, DAZN, you might sign up for that. Before you know it, you might be spending twice what you were spending before. And so if a big player can come in and dominate it, say, well, actually, that twice that you were spending before, all of that's coming to us, thank you. That can be a pretty profitable model, but I'm not confident, for better or for worse, that we will get to that point. And I think it's great that we've got the local players that we've got, who will, I think, continue to look at the grassroots sports and supporting local stuff. Whereas if we got to just a pure Netflix type model where it's one or two big dominant global players, I think that could be pretty disappointing for us locally.
And also, you've got some of the people that own the big products like the NHL and the NFL and the NBA. A lot of those guys are charging annual streaming services, $200 to $300 a year just for that. So I think the challenge these guys are going to have is they're not coming through a set-top box, they're coming in through the internet, which is the same medium that the guys that own these brands are pitching at. So, I love my football, so I love, subscribe to the NFL pass, and then you can rewatch whenever you want. But if someone was to say, well, look, we'll give you, football and hockey and rugby and basketball, and it might cost you $50 a month, it's like, well, that might actually be quite good. So I guess it depends, as you say, the pockets, if they can negotiate the deals with the ones that people really want. Otherwise, could end up watching curling or something from the, somewhere in the Soviet state, because 20 million people a year love watching that or something. We don't want those products. Won't be of interest to New Zealanders, but may have international appeal as a brand.
It's interesting when I put my futurist hat on and try and look out that 5 or 10 years and say this is how it's going to be. I'm just not sure, because as you say, the individual sports and codes and so on, they're selling direct in some cases. Then we've got the big international. Then we've got the local ones. I would like it to all melt down to what's great for the consumer, but of course, that's not usually quite how the free market always ends up. But there is competition at the moment, and I'm expecting that we will still have a level of competition, but it's probably going to be somewhat more complex. And I would imagine that with those efficiencies, that the prices would not be too crazy. That if we look 10 years out, there's going to be a level of balance, because people just won't sign up if the content's too expensive. There's of course always ways to get around things as well. So I don't think we're going to be in a bad place, but I think it's probably reasonably hard to predict. It's something you could be placing bets on in terms of exactly how that landscape's going to play out.
And what do you think about the set-top boxes and the bits of hardware that are coming more and more a part of that landscape? I know when Apple TV Plus launched, it's pretty much the same as an Apple TV, but they've got all the relationships with Disney Plus and everything, so it all comes down. And I heard even on the way here, TVNZ were broadcasting an ad talking about the fact that you can watch us on your smart TV or on your box top. So I think the hardware, if these guys are going to be serious, they're going to need to get apps in on the hardware vendors as well.
Yeah, so that's pretty important. We're in this uncomfortable position. It actually reminds me of when smartphones were new, and we talked on the podcast, and I guess my pretty strong feeling at the time was that I think most people were probably better off with a piece of a piece of hardware, a set-top box or a gaming console, what have you, to consume their entertainment through, in addition to whatever else, rather than just the smart TV having all the smarts. And we're now starting to see that really prove itself again, what the thinking was then, because there weren't a lot of apps in those days on the smart TVs. In the last few years, you can get most of what you need. Spark Sport became available across a bunch of the TVs, but And the Spark Sport example was probably a reasonably good one. If you had, I think it was LG TV that was 2 years old, sorry, you're out of luck with running the app. And look, one of our partners for the podcast is Samsung. Make a lot of smart TVs. But I'm sure they've seen me interviewed at CES, where I'm not always as much of a fan of the TVs as they are now. I mean, actually, if I'm buying a TV today, do I buy a smart TV or a non-smart TV? Well, mostly if you want the features, you're buying a smart TV anyway. So the TV brands, the Samsungs and Sonys and Vions, LGs, Panasonic, etc. They're probably mostly going to be selling smart TVs, but I think as a consumer, you have to be prepared that even if maybe on day one when you buy that TV, you can run everything through the interface. If you're somebody that likes to hold on to your TV a bit longer than you hold on to your smartphone for, then you probably end up plugging something in it at some stage. And the little Freeview streaming stick that you can get, the Vodafone TV box, and the Freeview set-top box, as well as obviously what you get from Sky. These devices are getting better. Well, actually, the Sky kit, I think if you want good Sky, then probably the Vodafone TV option gives you the best result, because you've got Netflix and a whole bunch of other stuff on there. But I tend there's always sort of a kink in the armor or whatever of all of these products. So I end up having a bit of a combo. And I've been using the little stick, the little Freeview, what's it called, Smart View stick, which is $140 or something, that lets you stream all your watch TV as though it's coming over normal broadcast, but actually it's being broadcast over the internet, and you've got YouTube and Netflix, and most of the time that works pretty well, but not everything. And then on the flip side, with some of the other devices,
And some of the new TVs are coming with the AirPlay support built into them, or
finally,
it's
yes.
like. But some of those apps
Makes
on
sense,
iOS are magnificent. Even the Sky one, where you can stream up to the TV using your app on your smartphone, but then you can multitask and swish that away.
That's right.
And you can just be using your smartphone while it's concurrently streaming up to your device.
Yeah.
So, once it gets to that, it might be going back to your original piece about smartphone, and a really smart TV could be
all you need.
be the option.
Yep. So, yeah, fun times ahead. And look, if we're anything like what's happened in China, some of us maybe need to spend a little bit of time at home over the next little while. So now is a good time to think about what do you need to get your home comfortable if you or a family member needed to self-isolate. Now I heard in China there was some real issues with the internet because there was so much gaming going on in people's homes during the day, and people trying to get a bit of work done and access some stuff over their work VPN or what have you, were finding things grinding to a little bit of a halt. So get your internet upgraded, get all the right gadgets, and away you go. Although I see on the flip side, there's a fair bit of caution out there, and people wanted to hold back on spending money because we don't quite know what the economy's doing. But I don't know. That's one approach. Just rampant consumerism, and let's throw lots of money at tech and gadgets. Isn't that what we're supposed to talk about on the show?
Sounds exactly the ticket.
Now, what else we got? The Amazon Go stores, which it must be I don't know 2 or 3 years at least since we certainly heard them opening. I think when we first heard about them may have been even further back than that, but they've actually opened now a sort of semi-full-size grocery store. So the initial ones that they open, you go and pick up a salad and a few little bits and pieces. Have you been to one of these stores? Because you've been in. I mean, you've spent a fair bit of time, backwards and forwards with Seattle.
In that part of the world, I heard about them. I never got myself into one, though I think it's fascinating because you've got so much tech that. If a store like that could really work and could work at a price point that didn't require Mr. Bezos's wallet to fund it, the opportunities could be great for all sorts of things, the rest of the world. But I didn't. I did, however, see. I got one of the New World card recently, and somewhere in there they were talking about some stores in New Zealand having the ability to register at the door for things, and I checked.
I was in the Tesla road trip I did a few weeks ago. We stopped in, and I now remember where it was. There was Whanganui, and went to a Pack and Save store because there was a ChargeNet charger outside. So, parked the car in there and, wandered up to the store, and they had little scanners that you could take around with you and basically just, scan prices and, basically as you're putting stuff into your shopping trolley.
Because they've done smart baskets as well. I know some people have done smart baskets as well that, you scan, as you shop.
So there's a variety of those things going on. I can see that the type of model that Amazon are going with. You can imagine that whatever they come up with, it might be super cutting edge now for a short period of time, but you've got to think the technologies that make that up should be more than likely the sort of technology that actually any supermarket chain would be able to roll out, because the cost of these things comes down. It tends to be off the shelf. We've got an off the shelf, image recognition, this and that. And I know I'm oversimplifying it all, but if they can make it work in a supermarket, these are big enough scale organisations, and there'll be some there are already entities that are developing that as an independent piece that they could sell to other supermarkets. So it's really interesting seeing that the technology has stepped forward. the bits and pieces I read, suggest that they've definitely been making advances along the way. They haven't been sitting still for the last 2 or 3 years, and this technology is definitely getting better.
It's an interesting market, Seattle, though, because there are so many tech companies up there, and the level of gadgetry that people have up there is so high,
yes,
disproportionately representative of probably the rest of the world, that I think a lot of these options get taken up quite early on in the piece. I had a friend who was involved in a company that Amazon was funding, where they would do delivery to the boots of cars.
Oh yes, yep.
Because so many people over there had cars that you could pop the boot with your smartphone,
yep,
and so you get your Amazon delivery to the boot of your car in the car park. They'd pop it, take a photo of the delivery, that would go back to you and close the boot again. So it sounded fantastic, but total fantasy outside of somewhere where the majority of the commuters have cars that they can open their boot on.
Yeah,
can imagine trying to do that. Parts of Wanganui, for example, I don't think they'd have the same uptake.
No, it's gonna vary. But if you look at those areas like Seattle and Silicon Valley, where the property prices are through the roof, being able to employ people into those stores is expensive. So when they're trying to weigh up the numbers, you're going to have a better. The numbers are going to stack up a little bit better, especially with early technology in those locations, than they might do in a lot of other parts of US and the rest of the world. But look, I'm excited to see these things progressing. But we need to keep in balance. We've still got to make sure there's a whole lot of people that need to be employed and have interesting work to do. So I imagine as we automate some of these things, there will be other jobs that come along, and we've already seen it over the last few years of technology creating new jobs in varying forms, from Uber drivers to people to repair smartphones and drones and bits and pieces, and that's going to continue, I'm sure.
I wonder what costs less for the business, the restocking of the shelves, or the computer technician to fix the sensor on the broken shelves.
Yeah,
there's swings and roundabouts. I think if you had that tech starting to go wrong en masse,
that could get pretty.
You're going to have a team of people in there for quite a chunk of a week, putting it back together.
Yeah, pull it all back together. If someone's driven their vehicle, or
a runaway
autonomous
trolley
vehicle is run into
the wine shelves on aisle 3 just dropped 1,000 bottles all over.
Yeah, it's going to be quite a bit of work if you've got to put together or re-put together a complex store, isn't it? Yeah. So good just to see that advancing, and of course there's related types of technology that are getting developed and utilised here in New Zealand, with the likes of food stuff. So we'll keep watching that space, and we'll as things progress a little bit from our local firms like Foodstuffs, we'll try and tap back into them for an update. For those who missed it, there was an interesting chat with Chris Quinn, ex Spark, who heads up Foodstuffs here in New Zealand, which is or Foodstuffs North Island. I think maybe it's $8 or $9 billion sort of turnover as a chain, so pretty reasonable sized business, and they're pouring a huge amount into technology, as a lot of other leading businesses are.
That's
and
great.
Have a massive team working away on one of the next, looking after their current things and what the next phase of the business looks like, and really that's what I think generally we need to be doing across the board is continuing to innovate and invest and make sure that as the big players, the Amazons and the like, do work out how to spread themselves a little bit more broadly, that actually they don't just sort of stomp into New Zealand and find that we've been sitting on our hands, and that they can just walk in and deliver something better than what our local entities are doing. I think we want to be doing great stuff locally, and I think there is so much good stuff going on.
I think that's one thing about New Zealand is that we have quite a high level. We're like a little bit of a mini Seattle. We do embrace technology as a country, and we do it at a quite a good level, not at a second generation or third iteration. We love to be first out of the blocks, and I think there's been a lot of tech companies in New Zealand that have validated a product that's worked really well in America or in Europe, by proving to the New Zealand business owners that it's a good idea to have a look at, and have had great support from this part of the world, and I think that's one of the things that we should continue to support and encourage. Make it work in New Zealand, because if you can, the rest of the world could be really interested in it as well. So very much so, and there is stuff going on, I think, in just so many areas. So I hope that a lot of those keep gaining traction. Now I'm just trying to see if I can find it here. There was an announcement in the last few days about an entity that had just raised some reasonably serious cash, and that is Halter. Somebody from Halter was in touch the other day, actually, and it would be great to hear their story. Once they're really out into the markets. I think they've been running for a few years, and they're getting pretty close to starting to to sell their offering, working in farms, and they have the I guess they've got what I understand about it from the bits and pieces I've read is like a wearable for cattle. Wow.
So basically, a device that will measure a bunch of things from the herd, and be able to then remotely communicate that back. So it sits in that
Amazing.
realm of IoT, Internet of Things, connected up gadgetry, and as these things improve, I guess we end up being able to look after the animals at a better level, keep them healthier, run the farms more efficiently, and so on. So
it's a huge asset, right? I mean, these beasts, some of them are worth hundreds, if not thousands of dollars. There's been huge investment in their growth and development. So it's you can understand the business case for wanting to keep on top of their health, and be aware as soon as you can be of anything you can do to protect your investment.
Yeah, absolutely. So that's definitely one I'm keen to hear a little bit more about. Now, some will be sort of wondering. I did talk about the Samsung Galaxy S20, the 3 different handsets launching in New Zealand as a special piece on the episode going back a couple of weeks or so, but nothing more, no sort of hands-on review. And there has been a bit of a challenge around the Samsung S20 from if the media out of the US is anything to go by. Now, I'm still waiting to get further hands-on. So I had an initial look at the varying S20 handsets ahead of them being announced globally, and completely blown away by the cameras. By the way, just this 100 times zoom, which of course is not there's a sort of software element, and so you're not going to get an amazing photo at 100 times zoom. But having, what I'm told was a 10 times optical zoom, 108 megapixel sensor, and being able to hold
8K or something as well on the video.
Yeah, 8K video. I mean, overall, it was just
Crazy.
amazing. But yeah, the headlines out of the US on problems with the cameras, the likes of Engadget, who spent more time with, with the devices in between, saying some issues. Certainly. On the S20 Ultra, which is the one with just the really impressive camera, basically a periscope inside of it. So it looked like maybe there's a little bit of software tweaking that need to be done just to get those working perfectly. But what I saw was, it was off the hook.
Wow.
And admittedly, I'm someone who the camera component of a top smartphone, is one of the most important bits to me. I think that's where we're seeing a lot of the advancement, and that's the thing I find most useful. If I've got a camera that can do, and in the studio here, we've got a GoPro, which has no zoom capability, but it's great for getting wide angle and varying angle shots in the studio, and those are great for footage with the Tesla and all sorts of bits and pieces out and about. And we've done all sorts of footage over the years with GoPros. New cameras are really cool, but when you can have something that's on par to that, or a whole lot better in some regards, and that zoom element that we're seeing just go in leaps and bounds over the last few years. I mean, that to me is that's great, and it's very, very useful innovation. Now I have over the last few years I've stopped generally carrying bigger cameras. I've got a big digital SLR and all that sort of stuff, and look, they do amazing photos, but the photos that we're getting out of our top smartphones, be it from Apple, and the phone I've been carrying over the last few months has been the iPhone 11 Pro, and really great on that photography front. But the Samsung, I'll put my hand up and say, Samsung, this what you've done with the cameras on this one, I would imagine that if I've only got one phone on me on a given day, I would want that to be the Samsung S20 Ultra, because it looks like it covers so many scenarios. So, but there's some software things that sounds like they're working on, so I hope it's software and they can fix it. They seem to be a little bit delayed with getting devices out. I'm hoping that it totally lives up to to the promises and to what I've seen so far. But if you're on the fence and so on and not sure, I can't actually tell you that I'm completely blown away yet, because I've spent less than an hour with these phones so far.
Then also, to be fair,
so
I also think
I
remember when the latest iPhones came out. Again, we had a 0.1 update came out almost within the day of the launch as well. So, for me, when I hear about these things, I think, oh, this is great. It's going to get the bugs worked out quicker, and it means that you're going to get something that's really quality, and they can quickly leave behind any stigma that might be attached, because these things are generally coming out hot. They've had a test group of probably a really small amount of people, and once they fix these issues, it becomes the amazing thing that everyone dreams for it to be. So
well, we're certainly seeing on the Android side, and I've been noticing that the top phones are pretty good at getting those updates and fixes and things through. Sadly, Huawei, who were just such a key player in terms of where they were at, are kind of out of the picture to a reasonably big degree now. I'm still waiting to get the hands on the Mate 30, and there's a bit of a challenge there. Miriam sort of dived in and reviewed it on the Mobile Tech podcast. But yeah, that's a great device, but you've got the software limitations because you can't run the Google Play Store. So that's for a lot of people that would just be that's going to be considered dead in the water. But we'll see. But the devices certainly that we're seeing, I would say across the board, are very good for most of the major brands. We are getting software updates, probably a level we weren't seeing 2 or 3 years ago. I've a bunch of devices from Samsung, Nokia. What else have I got? There's a few other ones that I've gone through recently. Just had a look at the software updates, and we're starting to see those Android 10, updates, hitting more and more devices. It's not perfect. iPhone, of course, it's just so consistent that the operating system updates just go through
every week or something. It seems like another one, isn't it?
Which is great. But I'm finding app crashes on iOS, quite a bit. So I know that it seems to vary for people, and it's always hard to know, is this the fault of the application developer or is it something to do with the operating system? This last week I was trying to post something in with LinkedIn and for the podcast, and every time I go in and try and be part way through this sort of draft post and tag somebody and then just crash and drop out. It's just, that stuff seems like that was maybe the norm sort of 20 years ago, but I don't know, it's sort of expect a phone and a major app like that to be able to work together without falling over. But I guess these things are changing all the time, and we're just not quite there, perfection wise. And I'm not saying that's an exclusive thing to iOS, but I don't know, it feels to me a little bit like iOS is
dragging the chain a little.
Not quite as smooth. As it should be. What are you running at the moment?
I'm running a XR iPhone and a Note 10 Plus. Samsung.
That's a pretty good combo of phones to have.
I'm still lashed to the Apple world on a number of fronts. I just can't quite get away from it. But something I saw this summer that I hadn't seen before, because now all these things are wireless charging, and you got the high power fast charge cigarette lighter, and the thing is I had both of those phones both get too hot in the middle of summer sitting on the dash. Now, because it's hot and it's been a crazy summer, and then these fast chargers run hot anyway, and everything just seems to run hot. And I had both of those phones at some stage between now and December just give up the ghost because they were too hot, just refused to play the game.
We're getting our devices to do so much now. That's not something that gets talked about a lot, but and we're going to talk about drones soon, but I found the drone, the Mavic Mini over the weekend, something that heated up to the point where maybe the sensor or the gimbal or something around the camera was too hot, so I got an alert about that. I had GoPro and the Tesla while we were on the road trip, and of course you've got a glass roof in that, so the sun's sort of beating down, it can get quite hot, and running a camera certainly at 4K that makes things hot as well. And then I've had similar challenges with iPhone, carking it, and I've wondered what's happened, and it's not necessarily telling me, but I've then recognized, I think this on probably Samsung and iPhone, if I remember correctly, where I've had issues with a phone shooting 4K video in the summer. Maybe I've got attached inside a Tesla where it's getting a bit too much. It's getting sun as well, and at some point these things fail from a heat perspective. So, and I'm sure that would be even worse. And if you were in a hotter country than New Zealand,
it makes you wonder what's going to happen as these things grow, right? Because we know over the last 10 years, fan cooling computers has been essential to make sure they don't burn out over time, right? Well, my nice jet black Note Plus that gets scorching hot in the summer.
Yep.
Would it be better to put it in a nice little ice bag or something, considering it's waterproof? Go back to water cooling these IP type of whatever 68 devices in water again, and try and extend their life a little. Who knows?
Yeah, it's ongoing challenges. Things shrink and they get more powerful.
Yeah.
I guess there's some actually some scientific challenges there in terms of the physical challenges. Now, what else did we have? I definitely want to talk about drones before we duck into that. There were a couple of other things caught my attention. Apple got hit with they've basically been told to pay out, I think it's $500 million US dollars over slowing down older iPhones. So that was something that was to do with balancing the battery.
Yep.
And it seems like a fair enough thing for a company to do. Is like, well, yeah, the battery's not going to last very long if and I guess they just got it. They were off to a big enough degree that people sort of noticed that their old phones were slowing down, and then those people were going out and buying new phones when maybe their old phone was okay, but just the battery needed to be replaced.
Yeah.
And they slowed it down. I mean, the fact that they've been forced to pay that much money, clearly that didn't stack up very well. I wasn't somebody impacted by it, so I might be minimising how it looks, and I guess if you were in that position where you're like, oh, my phone has slowed down so much with this, with the latest iOS, and I can't, really easily roll it back or what have you. What do you do?
That's
You
right.
go and buy another phone because you need your phone needs to work well, right? That's out of the devices that you use, your phone just needs to be able to operate and be snappy.
And the opt-out isn't there. I think that's probably why I think it's a fair enough penalty. If you could say, you know what, I'm happy with iOS 9, I'm just going to lock and load that, because if I go up, it's going to go slower and the battery's going to drop out. I mean, if there was a switch you could slide, then maybe...
So I'll go for battery life or I'll go for performance,
correct.
right?
But no one has that option, because if you don't upgrade, you're not supported and you're going to be hacked and all these other things. Almost like you wonder if they should have two paths of updates, one for the security and one for the performance, so people could opt into security patches but leave their version of operating system with its old functionality. But
now, one thing I've got to call out Apple for, which is great, TechCrunch, I read that they had blocked a facial recognition app platform called Clearview AI. Apple have blocked it, banning the app from use. And when I read about this, I was really unimpressed. Basically, the app allows its users, and Clearview AI was saying, well, their users are police forces, and that's the limit. But what we've heard is, well, actually, they've got a raft of organisations like Macy's and Walmart and Wells Fargo Bank and so on, so retailers, banks and whatnot, also using this app. And basically what Clearview AI seemed to be doing was going and scraping the web, social media, pulling down photos and linking them to people's names, and that they had a database of 3 billion photos. Now, first time I read this, I thought this said 3 billion people's photos. It says 3 billion photos, so maybe it doesn't represent 3 billion people. But can you just imagine, you having this app available in your pocket, you can, to access to this database, any photo you come across, you link that up to the database, and it tells you who the person is, what they're, all this other data, from social media. Certainly, if you get the name and you join up a few dots, then you can pull that together. I mean just the privacy breach aspects and just the spookiness of it all. Look, I understand this is totally possible. The technology makes this possible, and there's no going back. But we've got to have constraints around this sort of stuff. And
people have to be held accountable, right?
Apple's actions here, I just say, totally justified based on what I've read so far, and I hope the legislation or that there's some legal work done here. But I mean, to me, it just sounds spooky. It sounds like the sort of stuff that people should be going to jail for a very long time for if it's as bad as the what I'm reading into it. It's it's just not good. Not good.
But it is good. I agree with you. I think Apple are wanting to be a leader in all sorts of spaces, security in particular. With iCloud, they're promoting themselves. Keychain has got all sorts of private information in there. They're wanting to be one of the leaders in internet security and protection, and for them to then pull their support of a developer because they believe that they're being unsafe and potentially criminal, I think it reinforces that great posture that they're striving for. Whether Apple could do the same thing themselves behind the scenes with all the iPhotos that have been indexed in the same way.
Yep.
It's a different discussion, but you hope that they've got the controls that they're demanding of other people that use their platform there as well.
Yeah. Now, look, we've covered all the sort of the tech news things we wanted to cover. I think we might be out of time to sort of really delve into the drones, so we might have a special separate segment on drones where we can sort of delve in and talk about that new Mavic Mini that I picked up from DJI Ferntech last week and been pretty impressed with, and our experiences out flying drones last week, and some of the add-ons and gadgets you've got for your drones to enable you to drag a fishing line out into the water and
lots of fun,
all sorts of other things. So thanks very much for being on the show.
Awesome.
It's been fantastic to
really enjoyed it. Thank
catch
you.
up. Yeah, thanks everyone for listening in. Just a reminder, you can track us down on varying social media locations and the like. If you're interested, if you're listening to this, you're interested in, well, I wonder, what do those guys look like? Who's this guy, Paul Spain, and who's Matt, and what does this character Matt Archer look like? Well, the videos, we're actually live streaming today. We're live streaming to Facebook, to Periscope, which is part of Twitter, and also to our new YouTube channel. So if you're on YouTube, jump in there and subscribe to NZ Tech Podcast. That's quite a new channel. So last I looked, I think we had 17 followers, but there's actually a bunch of content that is starting to go up there. So if YouTube's where you consume video, then go ahead, like, subscribe, hit the bell, all that sort of stuff. But also LinkedIn, we're starting to do more on LinkedIn, and we will eventually be sort of streaming onto LinkedIn as well. But we are also streaming across Facebook and Twitter / Periscope. So really, the platforms you like to use, hopefully you can find us there. Love to hear your feedback if you have been listening, watching some of the video, and if you've got any suggestions or things you'd like to see on the show, then always good to hear your comments and feedback. And you can also follow me on directly on Facebook and Twitter and LinkedIn personally as well. So feel free. And as I say, feedback always welcome. The New Zealand Tech Podcast is here to serve you, our audience, and our listeners. And on that note, a special thanks to the brands that are making the New Zealand Tech Podcast possible. So we have Vodafone New Zealand, newly independent Vodafone, and we have Sumo Logic. We also have HP, Spark, Samsung, and Vocus. And, those are the brands that are getting behind, the innovation and technology ecosystem in New Zealand. And, as part of that, are supporting the New Zealand Tech Podcast. So a big thanks to those brands. All right. Thanks, everyone. We'll catch you very shortly on the next episode. All right. See ya.